Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes, you're more than welcome. So I want to start today's call by saying how excited I am about the idea of bringing coaching into organizations. At Global IOC, we want to change the world one coach at a time. And when we're changing the world one coach at a time, it becomes magnified in terms of the people we can reach, because we're reaching people in organizations. We train 65 in one company, 15, 22 in another. It all of a sudden gets big in terms of what we're doing around the world. So I'm welcoming all of you that are on the call this morning. I want to introduce the folks that we're going to be working with, are talking with us, our speakers. I set this call up as more of a fireside chat. I'm not going to show a lot of slides. In fact, I don't think I'm going to show them now. I'm going to show a video, but I'm not going to show slides because I want you to engage with the panelists and hear their stories and what they're doing. And then at the end, we will definitely take questions, but you can feel free to ask questions throughout. So before we go any further, let me see if I can really pull this off. I think I can. I'm technologically impaired, but I want to see if I can pull this off. Okay, Paula, I want you. This is Paula Hogan, who is Chief of Culture and People at AEF.
AEF is a people-driven culture where people come first. And so we made the decision that effective leadership starts with people skills. And so through coaching, we will spend time having meaningful conversations with our team members, building a foundation of trust to really empower our team members to be critical thinkers, to be able to do and be their best at AEF. Earlier this year, we introduced our Coaching Essentials program to the next level of leadership. The 12-week program was designed with AEF specific goals in mind, virtual sessions, and self-paced learning. In a moment, you'll hear from your colleagues about their experiences with the Coaching Essentials program. I'm excited that it's our plan that all leaders and aspiring leaders will have the opportunity to participate in this valuable program and really learn the skills to demonstrate that we're an organization where people come first.
My favorite aspect of the Coaching Essentials program was just the ability to work with other peers at AEF. There was really opportunity to share experiences, to share feedback, to work in smaller groups. There were often case studies at the end of each of the modules that we had to work through and solve based on some of the skills and techniques that we learned. And it was just really great to learn about others' perspectives and how they would handle it.
So one of the biggest benefits is epiphany, that I live in this thing called coaching for compliance, which is, hey, then here's a problem. What should I do? This is what you should exactly do. Here you go. You should do A, then you do B and C, and you're welcome. Let's keep going. But that bypasses this incredibly important exploratory conversation. And that's the best way to find the actual solution that is uniquely together.
Coaching Essentials program reinforced for me the need to have structured conversations with positive intent and a proactive mindset, making sure that we understand what's going to happen in our coaching session, making sure that even if it's a difficult conversation, we're coming to it in a very positive manner.
One thing I would say to future participants in the Career Essentials program is to really immerse yourself in the experience. Have those tough conversations, share feedback, really engage in the conversation, and do the work. That's the most important part.
One thing I would tell the future leaders going through this program, active participation is the key. Be there, be present, ask questions when you're not quite sold on an idea, fully embrace that discussion. That's where the magic happens, really.
So I recommend the Coaching Essentials program to anybody who's offered this opportunity.
Okay, so good, really well done. Let me invite these people that missed the video. We'll let them see the video later. I'll send it to them. Oh my God, it's not supposed to do that. I apologize. I can't even pull it up. Okay, so hopefully that will end that. Sorry about that. It's a good thing we're going to be cutting and pasting some of this video. Okay, so what I want to start with is this was a video from Paula Hogan at AEF. Before we get into the genesis, though, I want to introduce Dr. Stephanie Gelato-Barney and Dr. Kevin McGarry, who I have worked with in various organizations, who have been part of a large culture build in a Fortune 100 organization, as well as continuing on in leadership in other organizations, and will share their experiences as being part of a culture build, but also what has challenged them and what have been experiences as they've moved forward. But first, I want to go back to Paula and talk about the video and the genesis of the program that you're in the process of building right now.
Great. Thanks, Peggy. And good morning or afternoon, everyone. I guess what I would like to share is we had to really make a commitment as an organization to change our mindset. And that was really pivotal in going forward as a cultural change. And so Ron Ransom, our new CEO from a year ago, had experience with Peggy in the coaching program, and really decided that if we're going to say people are first, if what we do is provide great service and that's reflected in our people and the way that they perform our roles, then we need to focus on our people. And so the change was really in having a process-driven organization to a shift to where we think about how can we really help our people drive performance, drive change, so that we get the outcomes that we're looking for, and helping them be our critical thinkers instead of our traditional way of leading and just telling them what to do. So we made an important decision as an organization to really change our focus on people, and that's where it all started.
So tell me about the video. I love the video. What's the genesis of the video?
Great question, Peggy. Thanks. And so the way that we have structured the rollout is we started with our 7 executive leaders a little over a year ago in the program. And we've been bringing the program down to all of our 24 leaders, first with our senior leaders, and then with the final group of mid-level leaders. This was a way to really socialize or communicate our change in the way that we want leaders to lead, first and foremost with their people skills. And so we were trying to generate some enthusiasm about the program and really what it means. And so we chose 3 of our senior leaders to share their experience so that their colleagues could hear from them why it was so important and to understand a little bit more about the program.
And so now the next group have been watching the video. I will add that the gentleman in the video is working on his master's degree at Case Western and actually took a course with Boyatzis. So jealous of him. So, you know, when he talks about coaching for compliance and coaching for compassion, that's Boyatzis. When he talks about intended change, that's Boyatzis. So a couple of the critical pieces of our coach development program come from the university, Case Western in Ohio, and Boyatzis has led that. So Kevin, I'm going to go to Kevin because Kevin's going to need to leave us earlier than the other 2. What was your experience in learning to coach, then coaching, as well as what has transpired as you've led other organizations?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, Peggy, as you think about coaching initially, what I learned was when I first started into the program, I didn't know how to coach, but yet I thought I did. And I think a lot of leaders at the same level had gotten into leadership because they were good at what they did and moved into that next step. And that coaching was directing, right? It's like, do it this way, do it that way. And the program itself allowed the entire organization to have a process. And how do you coach? How do you have those conversations that align coaching across all leaders, whether they were mid-level to senior executives, to be able to understand how to have a coaching conversation, how to help develop people? And for me, that really allowed me to become a much more effective coach, a more effective leader in working with individuals, because I felt confident in the process and felt confident in the results that I was receiving from the teams as I was having coaching conversations. So it was truly valuable. And I think just setting the level of consistency across each conversation with each employee and each team member, but also consistency across the broader company, allowed other leaders to say, well, I ran into this challenge. How are you handling it? And being able to have a very consistent approach that's successful.
So you just finished your doctorate and you had quite an interesting dissertation. How does your dissertation weave into coaching?
Yeah. So my dissertation was, how do you lead millennials more effectively? And I'll give you the kind of the why I started, right? So I was leading a large team, mutual fund sales organization, half of which were millennials and half were Gen X. And I'm a Gen Xer. And one of the things I realized was that the millennial generation is a little bit different, right? There's different nuances to each generation. And going through the doctorate program and allowing me to do research on different generations allowed me to understand what's important to a millennial, what's important to a Gen X, and how do I coach? How do I start that conversation a little bit differently to be able to get a better response, get a more commitment, and to really make that connection to different folks on the team based on their generational preferences, and just really understanding where they want to go and what they see their work representing as part of their overall life.
So what do you think your biggest takeaway was from your research?
Biggest takeaway was, regardless of generation, regardless of who an individual is within an organization, whether they're a new employee right out of college all the way to someone that's a senior leader within an organization, the number one insight that I was able to draw from the research was that every single person, what they wanted was their leader to have a conversation about, what does their vision for their career look like? How do you actually help them see more than they can see themselves, see ahead 5, 10, 15 years, and to help them open their eyes to what's truly possible, and to then actually work with them on a development plan, to work with them from a coaching standpoint to say, I now know where you want to go. And my role as a leader is to help you get there. And that's why I'm coaching. That's why I'm spending the time day in and day out to remove obstacles, to help you see that pathway. And to be honest, some people's vision might be outside the organization. It might be to do something in the community. But at the end of the day, if you're a strong leader and a great coach, you can help them get better to accomplish their own personal goals.
And I'll put a plug in. Thank you, Kevin, for that, because that's what I wanted to hear. I'll put a plug in for our November webinar, which I think is on November 6th. Kevin's going to be talking about the full research that he did, what he's learned, what we can do as coaches to help people in the spaces of his study. So we'll have the full hour with Kevin, and we can pick his brain for what we can do and what that will look like. So I'm going to move to Dr. Stephanie Gilletto-Barney, who was also part of the build in the very large organization, came in pretty much at early stages of it and was with us, and has led in other organizations subsequent to that, and also had a dissertation from the University of Wales. So weaving some of the same things I asked Kevin back in. So what was your experience of being in a culture, as well as what did you learn from your dissertation that we can build into coaching cultures?
So thank you, Peggy, for having me today. It's great to be with all of you this morning, or this afternoon, as Paula was saying.
To Paula's point, to Kevin's point, I think when I first came in as a leader, and you can all see my quotation fingers, when I first came in as a leader, I didn't understand what leading meant. And so I came into a very large organization with a lot of managers. And I say this all the time. In my eyes, managers manage things. And we use that word a lot. To me, leaders, and as a people leader, we need to influence outcomes. Managers manage things, leaders influence outcomes. And as a coach, that's what I learned to do. How to influence outcomes, how to change behavior, change a mindset around I can't to I can, around do not accept no as the first and final answer to what if. And Peggy, you and I talk about this all the time. My husband actually says it all the time. Stop what ifing me. What if we could see a different outcome? And so to me, that's what the coaching culture is all about. Changing the mindset, the paradigm shift, right? So be it, around what could be, what if. And I think as leaders, everyone leads conversations. So I don't care if you're on an internal desk, if you're on a customer service desk, if you're answering the phone every single day, every single hour. I don't care what position you're in. Every one of us leads conversations. And we need to lead a conversation, especially if you're in sales, to a specific, you're looking for some outcomes. I've been with firms that have been highly performance driven, highly engaged in, we need these numbers, we need this percentage growth, we need to achieve certain outcomes. And I've been with firms which have really kind of led with, you have to have this done and do it my way, right? We see an awful lot of leaders say, you've got so many options to do it. Here's the way it needs to be done, right? This is my way to get it done. And then I've been with firms who've said, you know what, let's think about meeting people where they need to be met, right? Meeting them if they are an analytical, if they're high theoretical, if they are very relationship driven. How do we meet people where they need to be met? And can you drive better results? Can you lead conversations differently? Can you coach someone to lead a conversation differently so that that outcome is a win-win for the person on the other side of the table and the person who's actually delivering this? So to me, that's the embodiment of the coaching work that I've done over the years with Dr. Peggy. From my dissertation, Kevin and I we worked with the millennial generation. Kevin was working with leading them. I was looking at how do they make decisions, right? And so it is a very different generation around decision-making behavior. And what are the attributes? What are the influences? What are the biases from a cognitive standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, that influence how this generation makes a decision? And some of the things, my biggest takeaway was around trust. Paula, you talked a little bit about trust. And when you think about the next generation of leaders, whether it's a millennial or a Gen Z, that trust element is critical. No one will get into the foxhole with you unless they trust that you've got their best interests at heart, right? And so how do we have an alignment, a demonstrated alignment to the values that are important to this generation, meeting them where they need and want to be met? And then how do we provide a message that is clear, transparent, that is valuable to them? Because when you do those two things, then trust comes with it. So, I mean, that was a big takeaway for me with my research.
I love that aspect of trust. Thank you for sharing. I know Kevin has to jump off, so I want to ask the group if you have a question for Kevin before he has to leave us. We can play Stump Kevin right now. Do we have something that will?
If you stump me too hard, I'll just jump off.
Any questions? Kevin has a book out, Lead with Purpose. Hopefully later this week, we'll get it posted on our website too, but it's been announced in the newsletter as well. Any questions for Kevin?
Hi, Kevin. It's Terrence here.
How are you?
Just a quick one, man. I'm good in you. Right. So, Kevin, I think what we've seen in the past is that executive or senior leaders organizations are becoming younger and younger. In your observation, that change from the expectation that executives are a certain age group and now they've just become younger. What is it that you have, that you've identified in terms of the difference in approach, methodology, and all of that in coaching much younger senior executives in organizations?
It's interesting, right? So senior executives are becoming younger, right? You're seeing millennials become CEOs in some cases, C-suite, and a lot of the research that I've looked at on leading different generations, it wasn't necessarily for me initially. It was focused on how do you lead millennials, because I was leading millennials. That was kind of the purpose initially of my research. But what I've discovered over time and working with different organizations since then is that as you might imagine, right? So millennials are becoming C-suite. You're seeing Gen X lead baby boomers, or millennials leading Gen X and baby boomers. And so it not necessarily of where they are within a structure of an organization, it's generationally the type of thought process that one generation might have over another. So if you look at Gen X, regardless of where they are in an organization, they like autonomy. They like to be able to say, hey, here's the goal, let me go do it. Versus, a millennial might want, mentorship. They might want a little bit more, focus on sustainability, right? So in just having that conversation of what is the purpose and the overall expectation of the organization, the company is giving back to the environment or to sustainability. So as you look at that, it's not necessarily where they are within the organization, but who are you leading? Is the millennial leading a different generation, or the different generation leading someone else? To say, how do you start a conversation, knowing what's important to them generationally, but then as a strong leader and a strong coach, understand personally what's important to them, right? So that becomes really important as well, to say, for millennials, they want to know what the strengths and limitations of a leader are historically, generally, right? So they want to know what their leader's strengths and limitations are, but the individual millennial that you might be working with might not be important to them. Maybe it's around approachability, and that's the most important piece. So think of it generationally, and then bring it right down to the individual, asking those questions. What's the big driver? What's really motivating them? And then same thing on the other side, which is if that C-suite is a millennial, how do you have that conversation? Just like you're going to have a conversation with any C-suite exec, but realizing again, generationally, what are their preferences, and then individually, what's important to them in that specific position as well.
And that was great. I mean, it comes back to asking the questions. Are we curious? Do we know what people want? Are we coaching them based on what they need? Are we coaching them based on what we want them to do? So excellent answer. I want to switch back to Paula now. And Paula, can you give us a couple of success stories? You've been building your culture for a year. You have to have some success stories.
Thanks, Peggy. A few, not as many as I would have hoped. I think the success is more a permeation of how people feel about being part of the organization, that they are being asked more often by their leader for their opinion and where they want to go. So I think it's an overall feeling. A few success stories, I guess, might be one individual that I've been coaching on my team. is a thinker, and she is somewhat hesitant and not as confident. So we identified confidence as something that she wanted to work on to really be better in her role. And so we started with, what you'd call, how do you get 1% better? What's one thing you can do in the next meeting that might make a difference? And so she decided what she wanted to try specifically. And then the great thing was to watch her, the retelling of it when I met with her next, because she felt like it made a difference. And she was excited about the movement that she made in her own performance. And so, so she's probably my biggest success story, Peggy, because the conversations that she and I have are different, and she gets to tell her story and ask and make suggestions for how she can continue to build her confidence through competence. So I love the consistent language and the terminology that we have started using throughout our leadership team. Another thing that I really appreciate is, I think it was in one of our early sessions, one of the Simon Sinek videos on, identifying your group of leaders or individuals who really can get excited and push something through. And so we've done that. And those were some of the people that we included on the video, because they're so excited about building rapport with people the first thing you do as a leader. That I think some of that has been contagious throughout the organization. So that was another successful thing, is identifying that group that can help you build out the culture throughout the organization.
Awesome. It's so funny. I was just thinking that finding your 17%. Simon
Right.
Sinek says there's about 17.5% of people that are innovators and early adopters. And those are the folks that we got to bring into the fold. So really good reference back there. Steph, you were part of the organization from really the early pieces of culture build. What do you think were the success stories there?
So I think success, I know success is very relative, right? It's personal. And Paula, you were talking about a success story of one of your team. I had the aha moment for one of my members on my team. Have you ever had somebody that when you see them calling, you're like, oh dear, and you want to put the phone away, you send it to voicemail. There's just no way you want to talk to that individual. Maybe they're toxic, maybe they're just not you. And I had one of those wholesalers. It wasn't as if this was a toxic individual, just very different from myself. I come from a sales background. And so many of my people are very gregarious, very open, very outgoing, and can strike up a conversation with just about anyone. And yet I had someone on the team who was very thoughtful, very, he was very genuine, and most of my team was very genuine, but he was very thoughtful, very intellectual, a lot slower paced, very different from myself. And so when you're working through a coaching program and understanding where people need to be met, when you understand that, you can have so many different types of possibilities. You can understand the conversation differently, and you can have better conversations. And when I stopped wanting to speak to this individual the way I wanted to be spoken to, and instead the way he needed to be spoken to, the relationship changed dramatically. And that came from awareness, right? Self-awareness. And as a leader, self-awareness is critical. And that only comes when you work on it, right? You have to work on understanding who you are, understanding who you're trying to coach as well. And so as a leader, it was one of my most challenging moments, but it was also one of those moments that I learned from. And I grew to understand that regardless of what I need, it's how that person needs to be led. And so it changed our relationship. This was a very genuine relationship. This was a very authentic relationship because it wasn't my relationship. It was our relationship. And coaching allowed me to understand that very, very differently.
That's awesome. And I think we all have those stories of the person that did a turnaround that were like, oh my gosh. And then all of a sudden they have that pivotal moment. Paulo brought that up. You just brought that up, that we have the pivotal moment where the person actually shifts and we see the results of our coaching and we go, that's why we coach. That's that aha moment. So we've had a chance to really relish the success. So what do you think the challenges still are, Paula, for you and your organization?
Time, time and patience. When we get busy, I think we revert back to our old behaviors. And I think to really be good coaches, we have to take the time to build that rapport and build habits and behaviors and practice and prepare for conversations. And it's hard when you're an organization that's got a million things going on and everyone feels like they're very busy and they haven't been convinced that this is the way to better lead, to move slowly because they think of it as not getting everything done as quickly or efficiently or as well as you might if you can just tell someone exactly what to do and then move on to the next thing. So I think the biggest thing is time to really build those behaviors into your discussions as a leadership group, how you lead, how your leader leads you to make sure that you're thinking about and using those kinds of behaviors until they become habits.
Yeah, it's so interesting. When I start working with companies, I always say, you have to remember coaching is not expedient, okay? You have to know that you have to set the time aside and that people's process and trajectory for change is all different.
Yeah.
And you just have to be with it and stay with it. So those are really good factors. Thank you for sharing that, Paula.
Sure.
Steph, what do you think the challenges were in the organization you were in, and then maybe some organizations that you've moved forward in?
And so to Paula's point, time, right? When you're looking to become more self-aware and understand this whole coaching process, I think it's important to make sure you're doing it with consistency. So I worked with an organization that did it very consistently. So there was a structure to it. And there was a set amount of time over a week period of time as opposed to every other month. And then I worked with an organization who was doing it like that every other month. And so I think if you're really going to commit to this, you need to commit to it and not commit to it over a 2-year period of time, but commit to it so that the learnings, you can build on the learnings on a consistent basis. And you're working with individuals in your pods or in your groups, other coaches who are going through the program as well, and understanding what their challenges are, what their opportunities are, where their growth is coming from as well. So I think when you look at it, you need to be engaged, right? Paula, one of the gentlemen on your video talked about being engaged, being where your feet are. And so this program is something where you need to be where your feet are, and you need to, I think, do it have a structure, have a consistent process in place, and not do it every other month, once a month, something like that. When you're doing it with that type of timing, you tend to lose connectivity to it. And so then it becomes, I've got the coaching call next month. So I have enough time to do something, or I have the coaching call every other month. And so by the time it comes around, it becomes almost like a chore to get done the work that you need to do, as opposed to something of value, a joy to understand how I can become a better leader, how I can manage influences or outcomes differently, and how I can help a team become more of the we, as opposed to simply, we're going to make sure you got your performance. We got to make sure we got your numbers. We got to make sure you've got a specific percentage of growth. So for me, I've worked with an organization that did a consistent process, and I loved that. I've also worked with an organization that did it once every other month, and that to me was just, it was too spaced out to really kind of grow off of the prior learnings.
I think that goes back to what Kevin was saying, is that people want to know what their growth trajectory is, and they don't want to talk about it every other month. They want to talk about it every month. And if we want to hold people accountable, we have to check in with them and ask them where they're going. Steph and I worked in the same organization, and the way it was built, we had buy-in from the key stakeholder who was the president of that line. And so we built it so that we had coach meetings, coach training every month, and that we had interactions with all the leaders who were coaching. We had oversight coaching that was available to the leader coaches. That happened every month. We had meetings for when we finished the training. So I think, you know, what's really important is that we do the training, that we have the training piece, and then we hold people accountable to behaviors that relate to the training, and being able to apply the training and find out what's working, what's not working, because we throw a lot of tools out, and some tools are going to work for some, and some tools are going to work for others. And so we want to make sure that people understand how those tools work in order to help people change behavior. So the structure is critical, and that people are accountable. When we talked about our program at one point, we were working in the UK talking to faculty at a major university about what we were doing, and they were just they were in disbelief that we had such success, because we had a lot of success, and we also had that it was built into payment. It was built into what people were being paid to do. So it was built into their performance, is what I really want to say. It's built into performance. And we were able to say, if you didn't turn forms in, if you didn't coach it, we were able to say, well, then that's part of your bonus. So it was a bonus. And it was very much part of the program. So I think those are key elements, that we trained people, but then we held them accountable to doing it. Otherwise, it's one of those things that falls off the plate. And I think, Paula, you've had that experience, and Steph, you're seeing that. So I want to stop for a moment and see if we have any questions. I have other questions for the panel, but do you have questions, Terrence?
If I may. I just want to check with you, because, you know, when you're coaching an organization like you have been doing, and you've got a lot of success stories, there'll always be that one or two, especially at the executive level, who just are resistant to it. So I just want to check how you dealt with it, or if there's a success story where you had a senior individual, everybody has bought into it and everything is going 100%, but there's this one or two individuals who are just not buying into coaching. How you turn that around, if there is a story like that?
So I will say that I want to go back to what I think is key, and that is a senior leader was the stakeholder. And there were times when people would go complain to him about the coaching and having to do the coaching, and he just would say, if Peggy said do it, you have to do it. And so because that was his message, he didn't, he did not back down from accountability. And so people learned that they couldn't get out of it. And so they started doing it. Now that was, almost 15 years ago. So if we say there's a new environment, new generation, I think that you have to continue to sell the advantages, to really promote the advantages of, people doing better. I believe people want to do their best work at work, and helping them with the tools. Will we always have everybody? No. But, what we really want to do is have the conversation. Everybody's talking about the conversation. To have the conversation about what's really in the way. What is behind the resistance? Is it a belief? Is it an attitude? Is it an emotion? How do we clear that out to say, what would it look like for you to do a part of it? Okay, so when we tell people you have to coach and you have to coach your 10 people 10 times, 5 times a month, 3 times a month, whatever we put in as structure, it seems too big. So maybe coming back and saying, what's the one step forward? What's the mini habit? Instead of saying you have to do it the way that we did it in Steph and my organization. Does that make sense? Steph, Paula, want to add to that?
Terrence, I might also add something around accountability, right? If there is accountability, so if a senior leader is saying, hey, this is the process in which we're going to work, and these are the types of conversations we're going to have. If the senior leader is holding the leadership team accountable, then to Peggy's point, maybe some baby steps, right? So what 1 or 2 things could we do? The other thing I would say is start with the why, right? Simon Sinek starts with the why. Why is this going to be important to you? Again, people aren't jumping into the foxhole with you unless they believe in your vision, right? So the senior leader has to have some kind of vision around, this is why it's important. This is why it can benefit you and your team. If there are some small success stories, maybe not from this individual, but some other places that you can kind of glean from. So here's someone who started coaching an individual. And this was the result from this type of work. You can utilize some of those success stories and maybe, to Peggy's point, implement 1 or 2 of those little things. You're never going to have 100% buy-in. You're going to have your early adopters. You're going to have your laggers, of course. But if here's the culture, if this is what we want to be, then that's where we're going to lead. That's where we're going to kind of drive to. And that vision needs to be clear from the leader. Because if it's not, then you're right. You're not going to, those individuals will never buy in.
Paula, what would you add?
I don't think anyone would outright say that they don't believe in coaching. So there's like this quiet acquiescence or something in the background where like, sure, that's a good idea. But the challenge is, how do they make the time to actually be a coach? And I like the comments, Stephanie, I think that you specifically made around accountability. So can we build in that accountability as part of their performance expectation as one additional way to bring home the behavior? So it's a challenge, Terrence. It's definitely a challenge, and use your initiators, your innovators, your excited group to kind of drive the transparency around the benefits and helping people realize that this makes the hard conversations easier too. It's not all flowers and roses every conversation, but the more rapport you have and the more often you're talking with your team members about how to do things and what they think, then when something doesn't go as planned, it's an easier conversation. And I would think that's also an argument that no one can dispute.
Love it. It's so true. You've got to find the initiators. You've got to find the people that are bought in and help them and encourage them to help sell the program as well. Any other questions? Because I do have a question that's one of my favorites. Paula, Stephanie, you'll be interested when I let it.
What is your wildest dream?
Maria.
What is the wildest success like?
But Maria has a question first.
Hi, first of all, good morning for you. For me, it's almost 7 p.m. in the evening. Thank you very much for this wonderful conversation, very inspiring, very focused. I was just thinking, if I would have to do something similar in local organizations, I would have to work really hard to convince the owners, the managers, the shareholders that this coaching relates positively to some increase in productivity. It would be taken as a lovely bonus time, as something that the company does for the workers, the employees. But they wouldn't see it that way. Would you have this kind of issue? And if you have, how do you deal with it? How do you convince them that yes, this is because this is the result of my coaching?
Paula, do you want to field that?
I can. I think Stephanie might have some more. Our leader, our CEO, had already bought in, so there wasn't really a need to convince our leader at the organization of the benefits of coaching. But I think a comment that Stephanie made about outcomes. So it might sound like it's all fluff, but it really is about driving outcomes through people. And if you can figure out how you can make an eloquent argument and then maybe ask for some time to prove it out, because I'm a true believer that when you engage people at the right level, they will do anything to get the work done in the way that it needs to be done. I mean, so it's a very interesting piece because it's about changing the mindset, but it is technically about the work that gets done at the end of the day. And if they need to see it proven out, you might need to ask for the time to show the effects of that. I don't know, Stephanie, if you've had more practical experience in that.
Yeah, and Maria, when you think about it, it is a change in behavior. And let's be honest, who loves change, right? And especially if you've had a successful organization, who wants to change that structure, that process? But when you think about growth, and maybe there's some exponential growth on the horizon, things can't continue to go the way they've gone if there is some significant opportunities ahead, some significant growth ahead. If someone is asking you this question, like, why is it important for us? Then they're at least thinking about it. And so maybe trying to get one person's buy-in, one leader's buy-in, to allow you to maybe work with them as well around, here's a different type of outcome. What if we could potentially drive from 5% growth to 10% growth over the next 5 years, or whatever the case may be? And so if somebody is at least asking you that question, they're thinking about it. And so there needs to be some success story. So maybe there's a pilot. Peggy and I worked in a pilot type of situation at a very large company before it was launched to an entire group of leaders, because, you know, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of energy, it's a lot of effort. It's a distraction to some people because it's not your typical, here's what I do on a day in and day out basis. And so what can be done small, and then see what the results are, see what the outcomes are, and from there you can maybe grow upon it. But if somebody is asking you that question, then that's a great lead-in to say, hey, you know what? You're at least thinking of this and thinking differently. Let's explore that.
So let me add, and then I want to get to Diana's question. So what I would add is, when I'm talking with companies, Maria, I say that building an organizational culture does at least 3 things. It does more, but it does 3 things. 1, it enhances performance. 2, it closes knowing doing gaps. And 3, it aligns associate behaviors with the strategic objectives of the organization. And then I ask, do you have problems with any of those 3 things? There isn't an organization that doesn't need to close knowing doing gaps. People know what to do, but they're not doing it. There isn't an organization that couldn't benefit by getting 1% better with performance, and maybe even a little bit more. And number 3, we want our associates to be bought into the direction of the company and where we're going. That alone is enough to get the pilot. I love what Steph's saying. And start small. Start with a small group, and prove that it's working. Because what we see is better teams. We see better leadership. We see more energy. We see more motivation. We see more commitment. But that comes once we've been able to start the program. But we want to start, and I'll end here because I want to talk to Diana, but measurement is critical. Measurement, when you start a program, you have to decide what you're going to measure, and that's what you get back to the organization. If you don't have those rules of engagement set up in front, when you do it for a year, they're going to ask you if you did X, Y, and Z, and you were doing A, B, and C. So really good discussions at the beginning of setting up a program for what measurements that are going to occur in terms of outcomes is going to be really helpful. Diana.
Yes, thank you. This has been really great. I've really got my brain ticking here. So I took my hand down because that conversation, Maria, your question was my question. That really helped. And the pilot and the starting small and the dissertation I haven't finished is it's all about leadership. That's got to be the name of my book. It's all about leadership. If the CEO buys in, you're good to go, right? So this answered it because I'm working with a company that is all performance driven, all about profit, all about, and I'm working inside as a coach for some people. And then they asked me to do this performance appraisal stuff. So I come in and I'm listening to this and I said, what they need is coaching. But the people that I'm working with don't understand that they need a coaching culture. So I'm going to circle back to the CEO and really take a really thoughtful approach. And Peggy, you've taught me this before, so the pilot thing might be because he asked me to come and do the performance appraisal stuff. So maybe have a way, and you all have inspired me. I'm done.
Well, that was the purpose, to get thinking. My last question for Paula and Steph is my magic wand question. Okay, if you had a magic wand, how would you start a program? Paula, what would you do to start a program? You know what you did. Is there anything you would do differently?
I think just clarity around what you're trying to accomplish and why, and then make sure you have buy-in at the top.
Okay. Magic wand is starting with the person at the top because he has to say, if Peggy says do it, do it. Okay. Steph, what would your magic wand do?
And then, to piggyback on that, you need someone capable and competent to be a part of the program, right? And that all goes into the accountability conversation, right? Accountability starts with having the clear expectations, making sure you're measuring whatever those expectations are on a consistent basis, making sure people have the tools and the resources to be able to do the job, but also making sure that there's someone who has clear capabilities to help with this program as well. So if you want to start something, you need to make sure you've got the right people in place, because accountability can't come without the right tools and resources. This individual can provide clear feedback on what's going on or not going on. And then from there, you can make the evaluation. This is good. This isn't good. We need to change something, or we need to augment something. So I think you need to make sure you have the buy-in, you have the strategic vision, and then making sure you've got the right team in place to help move this off the ground.
I love that. And I will add that what we want to do is start externally and move internally. So we've got the tools, we've got everything you need that's been built at Global IOC for you to go into an organization, build it internally, and then walk out. Okay, because that's the goal, is we want to touch as many companies as we can. We want to build as many companies as possible. But when we walk away, they have to continue. They have to do the work that they've been trained to do without us watching whether they're doing the work or not. So those internal processes and accountability are critical. We're at the top of the hour. Excuse me. I'm grateful to Steph and Kevin, who got calls at 5 o'clock this morning asking if they could be on the call. And look at what an amazing job they did. And Paula, who's been planning this for several months. I'm super excited to be with you all. I'm excited about the opportunities for coaching and building cultures and organizations. And thank you all who came to the call and asked questions and participated and listened. If you have any questions after this call, certainly send them to me and I can filter them out to the panelists to share with you their experiences. In the meantime, have an awesome rest of your day and thank you for your attendance. I appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for allowing me to join everyone today. Everybody have a great day and night.